Millionaire CEO was strict, until he saw two lonely little girls silently staring at chocolate bars. This is not a story about a millionaire saving children. This is a story about two children saving a man who had everything, except the one thing that mattered. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? Because what happens next might just change the way you see everything. He stopped for water. That was all. A simple pause on the way home after a grueling 18-hour day that began with a sunrise meeting and ended with him dismissing his board's latest acquisition pitch with a single dry sentence. Aiden Mercer wasn't the sort of man who wasted time. Every minute of his day was plotted with precision, from the protein shake he drank at 5:30 in the morning to the 15-minute silence he observed before bed, a habit he had once told Forbes helped him maintain absolute control. His world was a sharp-edged machine built from order, logic, and invulnerability. Feelings were inefficiencies. Attachment was a liability. Aiden had spent nearly 20 years building Mercer Holdings into one of the most formidable private wealth firms in the country, and he had done it with the discipline of a soldier and the heart of a glacier. People admired him, feared him, called him brilliant. No one ever called him warm. That evening had offered no surprises. The final meeting had run late. His tie was still knotted, his jaw set, his mind cluttered with numbers. The streetlights buzzed overhead as he pulled into the lot of a small corner grocery, not because he truly needed anything, but because his assistant had mentioned the water in the office fridge was gone, and he couldn't stand warm tap water after a long day. The fluorescent lights hummed as he stepped inside, passing the empty aisles, with the practiced indifference of a man used to moving through spaces without noticing them. It was supposed to be 2 minutes, 3 at most. But then he saw them. They were standing at the end of the candy aisle, two little girls frozen like statues, not touching, not whispering, just staring. Their backs were to him, but something about their posture stopped him cold. He wasn't the sort of man who paused for strangers, let alone children, but this was different. The taller one wore a navy coat that seemed a size too big sleeve swallowing her hands. Her hair was pulled into a frizzy ponytail that had begun to fall loose. The smaller one beside her had on a sweatshirt with a faded cartoon print and a tear near the neckline. Her shoes didn't match. One was pink, one was gray. Both stood utterly still in front of the lower shelf where the chocolate bars sat in perfect rows. They didn't move a muscle. They didn't fight or whine or beg. They simply stared with such hunger and restraint it felt less like a craving and more like mourning. Aiden's hand tightened around the cold water bottle in his palm. He had passed countless children over the years, crying toddlers in department stores, snot-nosed kids at airports, tantrums, demands, parents fumbling to soothe or bribe. But this stillness, this quiet, aching stare was something else entirely. He wasn't sure what moved him, only that something did. Slowly, cautiously, as if approaching a pair of wild birds who might bolt at the slightest misstep, he stepped toward them. "Are you lost?" he asked softly, the usual edge in his voice, dulled by uncertainty. The taller girl turned first. Her eyes were wide, dark brown with a rim of hazel, and too still for a child. She looked directly at him but didn't flinch. The smaller girl didn't look up at all. The taller one said, "No. We're just hungry." The words weren't coded in drama or desperation. They weren't meant to provoke pity. They were flat, honest. That hit harder than any plea. Aiden blinked. "Where are your parents?" he asked. This time the smaller girl spoke, still not meeting his gaze. "They left." Her voice was small but steady, and her fingers twisted the fraying end of her sweatshirt as if it were the only thing tethering her to the ground. Aiden's throat felt tight for reasons he didn't want to name. He glanced around. There were no adults nearby, no shopping cart, no backpacks, no one calling out to them from another aisle. The cashier at the front was absorbed in a phone call. The girls were completely alone. He didn't think. He acted. He grabbed a basket and filled it without a word. Sandwiches, water, fruit cups, a few chocolate bars, juice boxes. He returned and gently placed the bags into their hands. "It's yours," he said quietly. For a moment, they didn't move, didn't reach for them, as if they were afraid the gesture would disappear the second they accepted it. Then slowly, they took the bags. The taller girl whispered, "Thank you," and the smaller one finally looked up. Her eyes were startlingly blue. Not the bright kind that sparkled, but the pale, wounded kind that held storms behind their silence. He walked them to the front, paid for everything, told the cashier not to worry about protocol. Outside dusk had turned to a chilly gray twilight. The wind stirred gently and the smaller girl shivered. Without thinking, Aiden slipped off his coat and draped it around her shoulders. She blinked in surprise but didn't object. "Do you have somewhere to go?" he asked. The taller girl hesitated. "Not really," she said. "We left the place they put us in. It wasn't good there." Aiden didn't ask for more. Something inside him was already shifting. Something dangerous. Something unfamiliar. "Just for tonight," he said quietly. "Would you like to go somewhere warm?" They exchanged a look. The kind of look people share when they've had no reason to trust anyone in a long time. Then they nodded. Together. Not with excitement, but with the reluctant hope of children too used to disappointment. The drive was silent. They sat in the back seat, clutching their paper bags like treasures. Aiden adjusted the rearview mirror to check on them periodically. They weren't relaxed, but they weren't terrified either. They were watchful, like animals who had been caged and let out with no explanation. He didn't ask questions. He wasn't sure he'd know how. He was used to boardrooms, not back seats filled with fragile trust. His penthouse was pristine, too clean, too quiet. The girls walked in hesitantly, eyes darting to the tall windows, the stone countertops, the sleek minimalist furniture. The smaller one whispered, "Is this your whole house?" He nodded. "It's quiet," she said. Quiet. He wasn't sure how to respond. He guided them to the kitchen. They sat on stools, legs swinging. Ate slowly, carefully, as if rationing bites. He poured tea but didn't drink it. Watched them instead. Watched how they mirrored each other. How they kept glancing at the door like flight might still be necessary. When the food was gone, he asked softly, "What are your names?" The taller girl said Maya. The smaller one said Izzy. He asked if they knew their last names. They hesitated. Then Maya said, "We told people it was the same. Mercer, because they keep sisters together." That made him freeze. "But you're not?" Maya looked down. "No, we met there, at the place," Izzy added. "She found me, said not to let go." She opened her jacket and pulled out a small shoebox tied with a string. Aiden didn't ask to see inside. Not yet. "Why did you tell them you were sisters?" he asked. Maya's voice didn't waver. "Because sisters don't get separated." Aiden nodded slowly. That night he showed them the guest bedroom. Left out clean pajamas from a drawer that had never been used. They didn't complain. Didn't cry. Just curled into the bed side by side. When he turned to leave, Izzy whispered, "Don't lock the door." "I won't," he said. He left it open. Sat in his office long after the apartment went still. He stared at his laptop but didn't work. Couldn't. Instead, he typed the name Maya Mercer into a search bar. Then Izzy Mercer. Nothing. No matching records. No missing persons reports. No flagged alerts. But that meant nothing. He knew the system. Knew how easily things disappeared when no one wanted to look too closely. He finally stood, poured a second cup of tea, and walked quietly to the guest room door. They were asleep. Izzy's fingers still curled around the string of the shoebox. Maya's arm draped protectively across her chest. Two strangers. Not sisters, not blood, but choosing each other anyway. Aiden watched them breathe in unison, felt something crack open inside his ribcage. It wasn't logic, it wasn't smart, but it was real. He turned out the hallway light, left the door open. And for the first time in years, Aiden Mercer went to bed not thinking about market trends or investor meetings. He thought about two little girls, one with a lie for a last name, and one who had whispered, "Don't lock the door," like she had never had a reason to believe someone might not. And somehow, without understanding why, he knew he wouldn't be able to walk away from this. Not now. Not ever. The next morning was unreasonably quiet. Aiden Mercer had always preferred silence. He paid for it in every aspect of his life: the quiet corner office with soundproof walls, the penthouse perched high above the city's noise, the kind of meetings that required people to speak only when necessary. Silence meant control. Until now. Now silence carried weight. It was the space between breaths coming from a guest bedroom down the hall. It was the awareness of someone else's presence in a home that had only ever been his. He stood in his kitchen wearing the same tailored shirt from the night before, sleeves rolled, no tie. A mug of black coffee sat untouched beside the stove. He wasn't used to mornings without a schedule. And he certainly wasn't used to waiting for the sound of small feet on hardwood floors. Yet that's exactly what he was doing. He had woken early, long before sunrise, restless. Instead of opening his inbox or reviewing contracts, he had found himself staring at the closed bedroom door of the girls. His hand had hovered over the doorknob before he stopped himself. He wasn't sure what the rules were for situations like this. There was no protocol, no policy. Only a feeling that if he opened that door and startled them, he would lose whatever fragile thread of trust had begun to form. So he waited. Eventually he heard it. A faint creak, then another. Soft shuffling. Whispered voices too quiet to decipher. Then the slow, tentative approach of bare feet. Maya appeared first, wearing the oversized pajama shirt he had left folded on the bed. It nearly reached her knees. She stood in the kitchen doorway, hesitant but awake, watching him. Her hair was frizzy again, flattened slightly on one side. She held the shoebox in both hands. "Good morning," Aiden said, careful to keep his voice even gentle. Maya nodded but didn't speak. Izzy followed, clinging to the hem of Maya's shirt, blinking up at him like she wasn't sure if he was still real. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Izzy nodded. Maya tilted her head, slightly gauging him. "You cook?" she asked, as if the idea amused her. Aiden allowed the faintest smile. "I scramble eggs." "Occasionally." Izzy whispered, "I like toast." He nodded and turned to the fridge, pulling out eggs, bread, a bit of fruit. The girls settled onto the kitchen stools again, watching him with the intensity of someone expecting something to go wrong. He didn't know why it felt so important to get the toast right, but it did. He watched it carefully, flipping the slices with the kind of focus he usually reserved for financial modeling. When he slid the plates in front of them, they looked down at the food with quiet concentration. No rush, no grabbing, no complaints. Just the deliberate, careful process of children who had learned to make every bite count. As they ate, he poured orange juice into glasses and placed them on the counter. "You can leave the shoebox here," he said to Maya. She shook her head. "It's not safe anywhere else." He nodded without questioning further. He sat across from them, not touching his coffee. After a long pause, he asked, "Do you remember where you came from? Before the last place?" Izzy said nothing, but Maya's expression shifted. "I don't think we were supposed to ask questions," she said slowly. "The more you asked, the more trouble came." Aiden felt something tighten in his chest. He leaned forward slightly. "There won't be trouble here." Maya gave him a look that said she'd heard that before. Izzy reached into the shoebox. Aiden watched as she gently lifted out the contents and laid them on the counter one by one. The broken locket, the faded library card, a folded drawing. "What's this?" he asked, nodding toward the card. "It belonged to a lady who read to us once," Izzy said. "Her name was Rachel. She had soft hands." Maya added, "She wasn't there long. She left. Or maybe they made her leave." Aiden picked up the library card carefully. The name Rachel Anders was handwritten in neat cursive. No address, just the branch name. He made a mental note. "Do you remember your real last names?" he asked. Izzy looked uncertain. Maya said, "I think mine was different before, but I don't remember what it was. When they moved me, they gave me a new one. Everyone did." "What about Izzy?" Maya hesitated. "She never had one. They called her Isabel, but no one ever gave her papers." Aiden blinked. You mean there's no birth certificate? She came from somewhere else, Maya said vaguely. She doesn't remember. I found her in the hallway crying. After that, we stuck together. Izzy nodded and leaned her head lightly on Maya's shoulder. Aiden looked at them, really looked and realized something he had been avoiding. These weren't just two kids in trouble. They were invisible to the system, lost in a bureaucracy that had no interest in finding them. After breakfast, he guided them to the living room and handed Izzy a small notebook and markers. Maya asked if she could read, and he pulled a book off his shelf. As they settled in, Aiden stepped into his office and closed the door. He called Daniela Ross, his personal attorney. She was direct, discreet, and the closest thing he had to a conscience in legal form. I need help, he said, skipping pleasantries. I have 2 girls staying with me. They ran away from a shelter or group home. They used fake last names to stay together. There's a library card with a woman's name, and possibly no official records for one of them. There was a silence on the line. Then Daniela's voice came through, calm but urgent. Are they safe with you? Yes, he said. For now. Do you know where they came from? A place Maya called the last place? That's all I've got. And a name. Rachel Anders. Daniela exhaled. I'll run it. Quietly. Don't call the authorities yet. If they're not in the system, this gets complicated fast. I'll check child welfare databases, state-run group homes, and private shelters. I'll need photos and any documents you have. He nodded. And Daniela. Yes. No one finds out they're here. Not yet. Understood, she said. I'll get back to you before noon. He hung up and stood in the office for a long moment, the silence pressing around him. Then he turned and looked toward the hallway. A sound caught his attention. Music. Faint, irregular, a sequence of notes being plucked from a toy keyboard in the corner of the living room. He walked out quietly and saw Izzy sitting cross-legged in front of the keyboard he'd picked up years ago as a gift for a colleague's child and never given. She tapped the keys gently, head tilted, brow furrowed. It wasn't a song, but it wasn't random either. Maya looked up from her book. She does that sometimes. Makes up things. Then she forgets them. Aiden watched her small fingers drift over the plastic keys. Does she take lessons? Never, Maya said. They didn't let us make noise. Later that day, Aiden took them to a small park nearby. It was cold, but the sun had broken through the clouds, and he thought maybe the air would help. They walked slowly, the girls keeping close to each other. Izzy spotted a dog and smiled for the first time. Maya climbed onto a bench and watched the cars pass. Are you always alone? She asked him suddenly. Aiden was caught off guard. Usually. Why? It's easier. She nodded like she understood, but lonely. He didn't reply. Izzy ran up and grabbed his hand without warning. Can we come back tomorrow? She asked. He nodded. If you want. We want, she said firmly. That night, Aiden made dinner. Pasta. Overcooked, slightly bland, but the girls didn't complain. They ate everything. Afterward, he read to them from a book he hadn't touched in decades, something his mother used to read when he was young. The words felt unfamiliar, but comforting. Maya leaned against the arm of the couch. Izzy curled up beside her. When he closed the book, neither of them moved. Do we sleep in the same place tonight? Izzy asked. Yes, he said. The same room as before. She nodded and stood dragging her shoebox behind her. Maya walked over and looked up at him. Are you going to lock the door? No, he said again. It stays open. She nodded. Good. He watched them disappear down the hall. Later, as he stood outside their door listening to their breathing, he realized something that unsettled him more than any hostile takeover ever had. He cared. And if Daniela came back with news that no one was looking for them, if the system had truly failed to notice or record them, then it wasn't just about giving them a safe place for the night. It was about deciding whether he could become something he never expected to be. A safe place. A permanent one. In his office, he opened his laptop and typed in Rachel Anders again. This time he added the name of the library on the card. A few hits came up. A woman who had filed a complaint 3 years ago about unsafe practices in a shelter. a volunteer program that had quietly dissolved after an investigation. And then a photo. A woman with silver hair and kind eyes standing in front of a library shelf holding a picture book. The caption read, "Rachel Anders, former children's outreach volunteer." Aiden stared at it for a long time. Then he copied the photo and emailed it to Daniela. He stood and walked to the window. Below, the city glittered in cold light. Somewhere in that sprawl, two little girls had survived a system designed to forget them. They had lied to stay together, pretended to be sisters because no one protected them unless they were, and now they were sleeping in his home holding onto a broken locket and a borrowed name. Aiden Mercer had lived a life built on clean lines on contracts and signatures and bottom lines, but tonight none of that mattered. Tonight what mattered was keeping the door open and not disappearing. The next week passed like a quiet storm. Not in the way of destruction or drama, but in the slow, insistent shift of air that made Aiden Mercer feel like he was no longer walking through the world he had built for himself. It began in the details. The mornings once defined by silence and espresso and the ticking sound of high-level ambition were now filled with soft footsteps and questions about cereal. Izzy always wanted to pick. Maya liked toast. Aiden had learned how to scramble eggs in a way that didn't turn them rubbery. He didn't know when exactly the routine became automatic, only that somewhere between the 4th and 5th day, he found himself buying 3 toothbrushes in different colors and asking the girls which one they liked best. Izzy chose blue, Maya green. When he asked why she said green reminded her of trees. He never thought he would care so deeply about something so small. They didn't talk about the past much. Aiden didn't ask. Not because he didn't want to know, but because he had started to understand that trust wasn't built through interrogation. It was built through being there. Through making breakfast, through walking with them to the park, through sitting on the floor with Izzy while she played the same 4 notes on the toy keyboard over and over until they turned into something that almost resembled a melody. Maya took to books. She read with the intensity of someone trying to unlock a map. And one evening she handed him a library receipt she had folded neatly in her pocket and asked if she could start keeping a list of everything they read. He bought a notebook for it the next morning. On the 6th day, Daniela called with an update. Aiden took the call from his office while the girls were drawing at the kitchen island. Rachel Anders died 2 years ago, Daniela said. No surviving family. She volunteered at 3 shelters in the last decade, mostly literacy programs. One of them was New Horizons, a privately operated transitional home in Harper County. Aiden had never heard of it. Is it still running? Barely, Daniela said. It's had 3 citations in the last 5 years. No criminal charges, complaints of overcrowding, staff misconduct, missing paperwork, and one very vague report that stood out. How vague, a note filed 7 months ago about 2 girls who allegedly left the facility without permission. The report says they were placed there by an emergency intake and didn't stay long. The staff didn't pursue them. It was marked low priority. No names, no follow-up. Aiden sat down. And this was before Maya and Izzy found their way to that grocery store. Yes, Daniela said. I've tried to locate birth certificates or any formal guardianship claims. There's nothing on Izzy. It's like she was never registered. And Maya. There's one file that may be her. A girl with a similar description was placed temporarily after a foster placement collapsed. No known relatives. The shelter reported that she left on her own. Aiden's hand tightened around the edge of the desk. They let them vanish. They didn't care enough to look, Daniela said, which makes this easier in one way, harder in another. How it means no one is searching for them. But it also means there's no paper trail to legally protect them. You'd need to pursue emergency guardianship and then permanent custody if you want them to stay. Aiden was silent. Then he said, "Start the process. Quietly. No agencies, no alerts. I'll file the petition," Daniela said, "but you need to be aware. If someone comes forward with a biological claim, it could get messy." "I'll be ready," he said. That night, he read to the girls from a worn copy of The Secret Garden. Maya asked questions about words she didn't know. Izzy leaned against his side and drew pictures in a small spiral notebook. When they were asleep, he sat outside their door and listened. Just listened. The city outside was still moving, still full of its engines and sirens and negotiations, but inside that space there was peace and responsibility. He hadn't expected to care about lullabies or sticker charts, but now the idea of not hearing Izzy hum softly in the mornings or watching Maya organize the bookshelf filled him with a discomfort that bordered on fear. On the 8th day, he hired someone. Her name was Mrs. Delaney, retired school teacher, warm voice, firm but kind. She arrived mid-morning and the girls took to her cautiously but without protest. Maya watched her closely, as if testing her for signs of danger. Izzy asked if she knew how to play the piano. Mrs. Delaney said she used to teach music. That won them over faster than anything else. Aiden explained to the girls that she would stay with them during the day when he had to work. Not forever, he clarified, just to make sure everything runs smoothly. Maya asked if she could help Mrs. Delaney with chores. Izzy asked if they could still eat toast in the living room. He said yes to both. The next few days passed with surprising ease. Aiden adjusted his schedule. He no longer left the office past 8. He ignored after-hours calls unless they were urgent. His assistant was quietly confused, but didn't question him. For the first time in over a decade, he missed a quarterly dinner with investors. Instead, he was at home helping Izzy build a blanket fort in the living room, while Maya insisted on alphabetizing their books by author. He bought a small shelf just for them. When Maya labeled it "Our Library" in pencil and taped a construction paper sign to the side, he didn't remove it. He added a label of his own beneath it, curated by Maya and Izzy Mercer. The name caught him off guard. They had given it to themselves, borrowed it, claimed it, and somehow it felt right. On the 11th night, Maya stood in the doorway of his office. She didn't say anything at first, just watched him. "Do you work a lot?" she asked finally. He looked up surprised by the question. "I used to." "Why?" "Because I thought that was what I was supposed to do." She nodded. "We don't like when people disappear." Then she left. Aiden didn't move for a long time. Her words echoed in his chest. He had spent so much of his life disappearing. Into work, into numbers, into solitude. But he didn't want to disappear from this. The following day, Daniela called with news. "I found a former volunteer from New Horizons. Woman named Marla Jenkins. She left the shelter after witnessing misconduct. I reached out. She's willing to talk. About what about the staff? About how they treated the children. She remembers Maya and Izzy. Said they were quiet. Close. Said Maya once asked her how long it takes to stop missing someone." Aiden exhaled. "Set up a call. Record it. Already done," Daniela said. "It's not enough for legal action against the shelter, but it adds weight to your guardianship petition. What else do we need? A home study, letters of reference, a therapist's evaluation, school placement plans. I'll get it all." "You're really doing this," she said softly. "Yes," he said. "I am." That afternoon he took the girls to a bookstore. Izzy wandered to the music section. Maya gravitated toward historical fiction. At checkout, Izzy spotted a small keyboard display. She pressed one key, then another, then 3 in a row. She looked up at him and smiled. "It's better than the toy one." He nodded. That night, a real keyboard sat in the corner of the living room. Izzy touched it with reverence. Maya labeled it with stickers. Aiden watched them make the space theirs. Slowly, honestly, completely. He started to notice the small things. Izzy always searched the room with her eyes before entering. Maya folded her clothes with precision. They both avoided loud noises. Neither liked closed doors. They never asked for anything twice. They thanked him for everything, even toothpaste. That broke his heart more than anything. Gratitude for things no child should have to ask for. One evening, as they sat eating pasta, Maya said, "If you could go back and be a kid again, would you?" Aiden paused. "Maybe, but only if I could bring you two with me." Izzy smiled. Maya said, "That's a good answer." That night, after the story, after the hugs, after the lights were dimmed, Aiden sat in his office and stared at the guardianship papers Daniela had emailed him. He read every word. Then he printed them, signed them, and placed them in a folder marked Clark Family Legal. He didn't know what the next months would bring. He didn't know if someone might still come forward to claim them, but he knew this much. He wasn't going anywhere, and neither were they. They were not sisters by blood, but they had found each other in the dark and refused to let go, and now so had he. He had found something he didn't know he needed, a reason to come home, a reason to stay, a reason to become someone better than he had been before. And in that, he finally understood that legacy wasn't built through money. It was built through moments, through belonging, through love, and he was ready to fight for it. All of it. Every quiet, complicated, beautiful piece. It was the 13th morning since Maya and Izzy had stepped into Aiden Mercer's life, and the penthouse no longer echoed with the cold silence it once wore like armor. It breathed now. The still surfaces that had once reflected only himself now caught glimpses of scattered crayons, open books, a forgotten sock draped over the arm of the couch. The kitchen counter bore the joyful clutter of breakfast in progress, jam smudges on plates, mismatched mugs, and a slice of toast shaped like a cat's head because Izzy had insisted on using the cookie cutter she found in the back of a drawer. Aiden stood at the stove watching eggs sizzle, while Maya read aloud from the cereal box like it was morning news, and Izzy sang to the toast as it browned. He had never understood before how sound could be comforting in such a specific way. Not music, not voices in a meeting, but the distinct, unpredictable sound of life that wasn't trying to impress or perform. It was just there. And it was everything Mrs. Delaney arrived just before 9 with her warm cardigan and the calm, grounded energy of someone who had once taught 30 children in a single classroom without raising her voice. The girls greeted her with hugs and a new drawing they had made the night before, a picture of the three of them, with the words, "Our school," scrawled at the top. Aiden gave her the printed lesson plan he had pieced together with Maya's help. He had never imagined himself homeschooling 2 children, but now it felt like the most logical decision in a world that had long since stopped operating on logic. Trust would take time and school would come, but for now what they needed most was consistency. And that meant staying close. Before leaving for a short meeting at the office, he crouched down in front of them. "I'll be back before dinner," he said. Maya nodded, serious and composed. Izzy asked, "Will you bring more stickers?" "Absolutely," he said. She smiled and tapped his nose with one finger before turning back to her crayons. As he stepped into the elevator, he realized something startling. He missed them already. It was the first time in years he had felt the absence of someone else in his personal space and not immediately welcomed the quiet. At the office, his assistant greeted him with a stack of reports and a raised eyebrow. "You're early," she said. "For the first time this month." He smiled faintly and said nothing. The meeting was short, efficient, and devoid of the posturing that used to drive him. His focus was sharper now, like trimming away all the unnecessary noise had finally made space for what mattered. By noon, he was in his car again, driving not home but toward the town where New Horizons stood. Daniela had sent him everything she had. A scanned report, 3 vague notes from state inspections, and a transcript from the former volunteer Marla Jenkins. She had described the place as a holding cell with cheap paint and said the girls had stuck out because they didn't complain. "Quiet kids get ignored," she had said. "But they're the ones who remember everything." Aiden pulled into the gravel lot outside a faded brick building that sagged slightly at the center, like it had given up trying to look useful. The sign above the door read, "New Horizons Family Transition Center," though half the letters had peeled away. No children played outside. No staff moved about. He stepped through the front doors into a small, dimly lit lobby. The woman behind the counter looked up from a romance novel and blinked at him. "Can I help you? I'm here to speak with someone about a donation," he said, slipping into the voice he used with clients he did not trust. "And I'd like to ask about your programs." Her expression brightened slightly. "We don't get many donors these days." "What kind of donation?" "That depends on what I learn," he said. "May I look around you from the state?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "No. Private foundation." She hesitated. One of the staff can show you around. Wait here." She disappeared down the hall. Aiden waited, eyes scanning the outdated posters on the wall. One read, "Every child deserves a chance," with a faded picture of smiling faces. The hallway behind the desk smelled faintly of bleach and something sour. 10 minutes later, a man in his 30s with tired eyes and a security badge appeared. "You're here to see the place." "That's right," Aiden said. The man shrugged. Not much to see. But he led him through a series of narrow corridors. The rooms were small, crammed with bunk beds, chipped furniture, and boxes of supplies stacked in corners. No artwork, no color. The children Aiden passed didn't speak. They looked down or sideways. One girl sat cross-legged on the floor in a hallway, tracing shapes into the dust. "How many kids do you have here?" Aiden asked. "Fluctuates. Right now, about 16. How many staff?" "Not enough." Aiden's jaw tightened. They passed a room that looked vaguely like a classroom. A whiteboard leaned against the wall, untouched. No books on the shelves. "Do you recall 2 girls, maybe 7 and 6, who left last year? One was called Maya." The man shrugged. "Kids come and go. They don't stay long. If no one comes for them, they get moved. Or they run off. We don't chase." "Why not?" Aiden asked, voice hardening. The man didn't answer. "Have you ever reported missing children?" "It's not our job," the man said. "They're not wards of the state. They're just between places." The tour ended in a back room filled with broken toys and outdated clothes. "You seen enough?" the man asked. Aiden nodded once. "More than enough." He turned and walked out, his spine stiff, his breath short. He didn't speak until he was back in the car, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. He sat there for a long time. Then he called Daniela. "There are ghosts in that place," he said. "Those girls vanished and no one cared. No one looked. There are more like them. I know it. We'll keep building the case," Daniela said. "But be careful. If we expose them now, they'll close ranks. They'll cover their tracks." "We don't make this public," Aiden said. "Not yet, but we don't stop either." When he returned to the penthouse, the girls ran to the door to greet him. Maya had made a paper chain to count the days until spring. Izzy had drawn a new picture of their living room with the piano in the corner and 3 stick figures labeled "Me, Maya, and Daddy." He crouched down and hugged them both. "What's this?" he asked, pointing to the picture. "It's our place," Izzy said. Maya added, "We made it safe." That night, after dinner and story time, Aiden stood in the hallway staring at the paper chain hanging on the wall. He thought of the shelter of the girl drawing dust on the floor, of the silence that clung to every wall. He knew without question that he would never let Maya or Izzy go back. Not to that. Not to any version of that. Later, while they slept, he sat at his desk and filled out the formal petition for emergency guardianship. He uploaded copies of the therapist's notes, the drawings, the letters from Mrs. Delaney, and the pediatrician who had examined the girls last week. He added a photo of the girls at the park, laughing. He added a line at the end of the form. Proposed names for legal identification: Maya Mercer and Isabel Mercer. His hands paused over the keyboard. Then he typed one final sentence: "I am willing to assume all legal, emotional, and financial responsibility for their care, safety, and well-being." Permanently, he hit send, closed the laptop, and sat in the dark, listening again for the sound of their breathing through the hallway. 2 little girls who had once stood silently in front of a chocolate shelf, afraid to reach. Now sleeping under his roof, trusting him to stay. And he would, no matter what it took. Aiden Mercer's penthouse was no longer just an address. It had become a living, breathing space filled with crayons, giggles, soft music, and something even rarer in a home built by ambition and glass warmth. Mornings began not with spreadsheets and black coffee, but with serial debates and Maya's very official daily plans handwritten in her neatest handwriting. Izzy insisted on decorating the hallway mirror with dry erase doodles, most of which featured 3 smiling stick figures holding hands. Each day their laughter added color to the space his wealth never could. And yet, even as the days took on the rhythm of family, a quiet urgency throbbed beneath the surface like a distant drumbeat that only he could hear. It came from the knowledge that what they had was still fragile, still dependent on paperwork and process, and the unspoken hope that no one from the girl's past would rise from the shadows to tear it apart. Daniela's voice, calm and cautious, replayed in his head every night. Until the court finalizes guardianship, anything can happen. So Aiden did what he had always done. When stakes were high, he prepared for everything. Meetings with lawyers, consultations with therapists, even background checks on every staff member who had ever worked at New Horizons in the last decade. If someone came forward to claim Maya or Izzy, they would have to go through him first, and he would be ready. But something else had shifted too. Something inside him. It was more than obligation or guilt. It was more than just love, though that had quietly taken root without his permission. It was identity. For the first time in his life, Aiden didn't just want to protect something. He wanted to belong to it. Every morning that he poured juice into mismatched cups every evening, he listened to Maya's detailed recount of what she and Mrs. Delaney had studied every night. Izzy curled up beside him during story time. It all whispered the same truth. He was no longer just a man who ran a company. He was their person, their home. And yet the outside world still demanded his attention. His board of directors had grown restless in his absence. It began with whispers and escalated to a meeting request marked urgent. Aiden knew what that meant. They were ready to question him, to remind him that empires didn't run themselves, and distractions, no matter how noble, were liabilities. He arrived at the corporate tower with a stack of reports under one arm and a folder of adoption paperwork under the other. The contrast was not lost on him. Inside the sleek, polished conference room sat 12 men and women in suits that cost more than most people made in a month. Vivian Cross, the acting chairwoman, sat at the head of the table with her signature crimson lipstick and steely eyes. "Aiden," she said without smiling, "thank you for gracing us with your presence." He ignored the jab and took his seat. "Let's make this quick," he said. "I have to be home by 6. Someone snorted. Vivian arched a brow. "Still playing house, are we? I'm raising 2 children," he said flatly. "That's not a game." "We're concerned," said Thomas, one of the senior partners. "Your absence has created instability. Investors are asking questions." "The company is performing better than ever," Aiden replied. "Our quarterly profits are up. The acquisition of Ellery Tech finalized last week." "What exactly is the problem?" Vivian said. "You've changed. You're distracted. And we can't risk your personal life derailing everything we've built." "Everything I built," he corrected. "You all followed." "This isn't about credit," she said. "It's about control. You're not the same man who worked 20-hour days, who lived in this building, who fired 5 executives before lunch. You've gone soft." "No," he said, standing. "I've become human. There's a difference." "Then maybe you're no longer fit to lead," she said coolly. The silence that followed was sharp. Aiden reached into his folder and pulled out a document. "These are the transfer protocols," he said. "If you want to replace me, you'll need a supermajority vote." "You don't have it." "We'll see," she said. "You've changed, Aiden. Not everyone sees that as progress." He left without another word. He didn't need to stay and argue. He had something more important to protect. That evening he arrived home just in time to find Izzy staging a tea party with stuffed animals and Maya attempting to calculate the change from their imaginary bakery sales. When he walked through the door, they both looked up and beamed. No one had ever smiled at him like that before. Like he was the sun returning. He dropped to his knees and let Izzy wrap her arms around his neck. Maya stood nearby holding a piece of paper. "I wrote you something," she said shyly. He took it. It was a short poem titled Our New Day. It spoke of mornings with pancakes, stories before bed, and someone who listened. At the bottom, in carefully printed letters, it read, "Thank you for staying." Aiden felt something in his chest shift again, something deep and permanent. Later that night, as they brushed their teeth and Izzy demanded her nightly 2 songs before bed, he realized how close he had come to never knowing this, to never hearing her laugh, never seeing Maya's eyebrows furrow in concentration, never holding them both after a nightmare. What would he have been if he had never stopped at that store for water, if he hadn't looked down that candy aisle, a man with more time, more money, but infinitely less of a soul. The next day, Daniela called with news. "We have a hearing date," she said. 2 weeks from today. The judge is familiar with your petition. I've prepped the case. Your letters of support are strong. The only thing missing is a home study walkthrough. When tomorrow morning? Aiden nodded. "We'll be ready." The following 24 hours were a blur of cleaning, organizing, and gently coaching the girls on what to expect. "Just be yourselves," he told them. "Answer honestly. There are no wrong answers." Maya took it seriously. Izzy drew a picture for the social worker with the words, "Welcome to our house. We like toast and love." The next morning, a kind-eyed woman named Carla arrived. She observed, quietly asked gentle questions, and took notes as the girls showed her around the penthouse. Maya explained their morning routine with the precision of a small general. Izzy introduced each of her stuffed animals by name. Carla smiled often. And when she left, she turned to Aiden and said, "They're lucky to have you, but you're luckier to have them." He didn't disagree. That night he cooked dinner himself. Pancakes and strawberries. The girls cheered. They ate in pajamas. They watched a nature documentary and fell asleep halfway through. Aiden carried them to their beds and lingered in the doorway for a long time, just watching them breathe, just memorizing the sound of safety. He had built towers of steel and concrete, but this fragile, joyful, ordinary night was his greatest accomplishment. As he stepped onto the balcony, the city blinked below, indifferent and massive, but inside, in the space he had once designed for solitude, lived something infinitely rarer. A life not earned through profit or power, but through presence, through showing up, through choosing someone again and again. And he would, as long as he lived, because love wasn't a transaction. It was a promise, and he had no intention of breaking it. He looked up at the stars and whispered softly, "I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever." The morning of the court hearing arrived with a quiet stillness that clung to every surface of the penthouse. The city outside was already stirring, but inside time seemed to pause. Maya was up first, her hands folded in her lap as she sat at the kitchen island in a pale blue dress Aiden had picked out himself. It had small sunflowers printed along the hem, and she had chosen it because Izzy said it looked like a sky that smiled. Izzy, on the other hand, had fallen back asleep after brushing her teeth, and now lay curled on the couch with one sock halfway off her hair, a soft tangle. Aiden didn't wake her yet. He stood by the window sipping coffee and reading through his own statement for the 100th time. He didn't need to. Every word had already carved itself into his bones. He had spent years in courtrooms, contracts, disputes, acquisitions, dissolutions, but never had he entered one with this kind of trembling. This time, it wasn't about power or profit. It was about love, about permanence, about whether a judge would see what he now knew in his soul to be true, that he wasn't rescuing Maya and Izzy. They had rescued him. Daniela arrived right on time. Her briefcase clicked open with the usual efficiency, but there was something warmer in her smile than usual. "You ready?" she asked. Aiden nodded. "More than I've ever been." Maya looked up. "Will they ask me questions?" "Maybe," Daniela said gently, "but only if they need to. And you just tell the truth. That's all anyone can ask." Izzy yawned her way into the kitchen, then blinking as she reached for her favorite stuffed bear. "Can we bring Sunny?" "Definitely," Aiden said. Sunny's part of the team. They left the penthouse together, a little formation of hands and hearts, and drove to the courthouse in silence, broken only by Izzy humming under her breath and Maya tapping her shoes together nervously. The courtroom was colder than it needed to be and smelled faintly of dust and ink. Aiden had never noticed that before. He adjusted the collar of his jacket and held Izzy's hand while Maya clutched a book she had brought for comfort. The judge was a woman in her 60s with short silver hair and sharp eyes that softened just slightly when she looked at the girls. Daniela presented the paperwork outlining the temporary custody already granted the stability of Aiden's home, the assessments from the child psychologist, the home study approval, and letters of support from Mrs. Delaney, the pediatrician, and even one from a local parent whose children had met Maya and Izzy at the park and grown fond of them. Then came Aiden's turn. He stood statement in hand, but when the judge invited him to speak, he didn't read from the page. He folded it slowly and looked at her directly. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady, "I was not looking to become a father. In fact, I spent most of my life avoiding it. I thought I was better suited to spreadsheets than lullabies. But then I met two girls who didn't ask for anything. They didn't beg or plead or try to charm me. They just stood in front of a chocolate shelf, silent and scared, and I saw something in them that cracked me open. Since then, they've taught me more about presence, patience, and love than I thought I was capable of. I don't just want to provide for them. I want to be there when they fall, when they shine, when they change the world in ways I can't yet imagine. I'm not asking to save them. I'm asking for the privilege of walking beside them." Every step of the way, the courtroom was quiet. Izzy clutched Sonny tighter. Maya's eyes shone, but she didn't cry. She sat up straighter, her back pressed against the bench as if trying to grow an inch taller for the occasion. The judge nodded once. Then she looked at the girls. "Would either of you like to say something?" Maya looked to Aiden. He nodded gently. She stood, walked carefully to the front. "I used to think grown-ups only cared when they had to," she said. "But Aiden, he cares even when no one's looking. He listens. He reads bedtime stories even when he's tired. He learned how to braid hair because I asked. He makes pancakes on Saturdays. He doesn't yell, he just stays. And that makes me feel safe." Izzy, without being asked, ran to Maya's side and added, "He also gives us whipped cream when it's not even breakfast. That means he loves us." The judge smiled then, a small, real smile. She leaned forward. "Thank you, girls. That's more than enough." After a pause, she looked at Aiden again. "You've done something rare here, Mr. Mercer. You've shown up. And not just with resources, but with your whole self. The court hereby grants permanent guardianship of Maya and Isabel to Aiden Mercer, effective immediately." The gavel came down like the softest sound in the world. Izzy shouted, "We won," and jumped into Aiden's arms. Maya followed more quietly, but no less tightly. He held them both. He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe for a moment. His world, which had once been numbers and strategy, now smelled like strawberry shampoo and sounded like children laughing into his chest. They celebrated with pizza and ice cream and dancing in the living room to music. None of them really knew the words to. Maya wore her sunflower dress like it was armor. Izzy wore a paper crown she had made from courtroom flyers. And Aiden wore the look of a man who had finally arrived in the life he never knew he wanted. But later that night, after the girls were asleep, a call came. A private number. Daniela's voice tense and careful. "I need you to know something," she said. "There's a man. His name is Ray Porter. He's an ex-staff member at New Horizons, fired 6 months ago. He just made contact, claims to have information about what really happened to several children who went missing from that place, including someone named Isabel." Aiden's heart stopped. What did he say? Only that he wants to talk, but he's scared. Says he'll only meet in person, and only with you. When tomorrow. He'll text a location in the morning. Aiden looked toward the hallway where the girls slept. Safe. Finally his. And now someone might be coming for them. Or worse, might be part of what hurt them before. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room and watched the city until the stars faded. He listened to every breath the girls took, counting each one as a promise. He would meet Ray Porter. He would hear the truth. And if anyone came to threaten what they had built, he would burn the world down before letting them near his daughters. Because that's what they were now. Not by blood, but by choice. And there was no stronger bond than the one formed when love wasn't given out of duty, but out of the simple, irrevocable decision to stay. The morning came with an eerie stillness, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Aiden sat at the edge of his bed, already dressed high, abandoned on the chair blazer slung over one shoulder. The weight in his chest was unfamiliar yet unmistakable. He had faced boardrooms, mergers, economic collapse, and lawsuits, but this uncertainty, this threat to the fragile world he had built with Maya and Izzy, was heavier than all of it combined. The girls were still asleep, their room dim and quiet. Maya's sunflower dress lay folded on the chair. Izzy had fallen asleep with Sunny tucked beneath her chin and a new drawing taped to the wall that read, "My family is strong." Aiden touched it as he passed, anchoring himself to that phrase like a prayer. By the time the message arrived from Ray Porter, the sun was just beginning to filter through the skyline. The text was simple. One word: bench. Attached was a location pin for a park on the outskirts of the city. Not a place Aiden frequented. Not a place he had reason to trust. But he had lived long enough to know that truth rarely came served on silver platters. It came hidden in alleys. It came whispered from the edges. And sometimes it came from the people most afraid of being seen. He didn't tell Daniela. Not yet. He left a note for the girls on the kitchen counter next to a fresh plate of pancakes and a tiny bouquet of daisies Maya had picked the day before. He wrote, "Be good today. I'll be home soon. Remember, you're my favorite story." Then he slipped out, blending into the morning crowd like a man running an errand, not like someone preparing to confront the darkness behind his daughter's past. The park was nearly empty. A few joggers, a man tossing crumbs to pigeons, a mother pushing a stroller, and there, near the far bench beneath a drooping willow tree, stood a man in a faded jacket hood, up despite the warmth. Aiden approached slowly. Ray. The man turned, pale, thin, eyes darting, hands twitching. "You came," he muttered. "Didn't think you would. People like you don't usually show up." "You said you had information," Aiden said calmly, "about Isabel." Ray's lips twitched, and Maya, and others, kids like them, quiet ones, smart ones, easy to move around without drawing attention. Aiden's spine stiffened. "What do you mean move around New Horizons wasn't just a shelter?" Ray said, voice low. "It was a pass-through. For kids the system didn't want to deal with. Ones with no paperwork, or the kind whose paperwork was buried so deep no one would find it. There were whispers, sponsors, people who paid." Aiden's jaw clenched. Paid for what access Ray whispered. To children, for whatever they wanted. Some were adopted. Others just disappeared. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. But I saw enough. And when I started asking questions, they fired me. Said I'd broken protocol. I left quietly. But I've been watching. And when I saw your face in the news with those girls, I recognized them. Especially the younger one. She used to sleep in the hallway near the boiler room, always curled around that stuffed bear. No one ever called her by name, just the small one. Aiden's fists curled. His vision darkened. He wanted to reach across the bench and shake the man, demand more, demand names. But he stayed still, focused. Why tell me Ray looked up hollow-eyed? Because you looked like someone who might actually care. And because I'm scared. There are others who know. Some still work there, some don't. But they're dangerous. And if they find out I talked, they won't. Aiden said, "I'll make sure of it, but I need proof. Names, documents, anything that links them to what you're saying." Ray nodded slowly. "I have files, kept copies before I left. Not everything. But enough. Come back tonight. I'll bring them. Same place." Aiden hesitated. "Why not give them now?" "Because I don't carry that stuff in daylight," Ray muttered. "Too risky. And because I need to know you're serious." Aiden didn't blink. "I'm serious. Bring them. Tonight." He left the park with his mind on fire. This was no longer just about protecting Maya and Izzy. This was about tearing down the walls that had kept so many children invisible, forgotten. He called Daniela, told her everything. She didn't gasp. She didn't panic. She said, "Bring me the files. We'll go to the state attorney." Back at home, the girls were watching cartoons, legs tangled, hair wild, pancake syrup on their cheeks. Aiden didn't tell them anything. He just joined them on the couch, wrapping one arm around each of them, holding them as if someone might try to take them away at any second. And maybe someone would, but he would not let it happen. The sun dipped low that evening. The city glowed with gold and shadow. Aiden arrived at the park at the agreed time. The bench was empty. He waited. 5 minutes, 10, 15. Then he heard it. A rustling, a footstep. Ray appeared from behind a tree, a backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked more nervous than before. Here, he said, handing over the bag. Don't open it here, just go. And be careful. If anyone knows you have this, they'll come for me, Aiden finished. Let them try. Back at the penthouse after the girls had gone to bed, Aiden opened the bag. Inside were folders, dozens. Faded copies of intake forms, lists of donors' internal email surveillance stills. Some pages were stamped confidential. Others had names redacted with shaky black marker. But there were enough names left intact to draw a map. And there, in one faded photo, was Izzy curled up in a hallway bare under her chin, eyes wide and too old for her tiny frame. Aiden's throat closed. He kept turning pages. There was a report about Maya. It said she had been dropped off anonymously, no contact information, no follow-up required. But someone had written in the margins bright. Could be of use. Aiden closed the file slowly. His hands shook. He called Daniela. She answered on the first ring. You were right, he said. This isn't just a custody case. This is a crime scene. And we're going to expose every single one of them. Come in first thing tomorrow, she said. We'll prepare everything. We'll take this to the top. Aiden hung up and stepped into the hallway. He looked in on the girls. Maya was curled under her blanket, a book splayed across her chest. Izzy's crown from the courthouse was still on her head. They were safe. For now. But Aiden knew the storm was coming. He had seen the names, and one of the donors listed, was a familiar one. A corporate investor, a board member, someone who had once shaken his hand at a holiday gala and spoken about philanthropy and progress. Vivian Cross. The enemy wasn't far. The corruption wasn't in the shadows. It was in the building he used to run. And now he understood. They hadn't just wanted him distracted because he had softened. They wanted him gone because he was getting too close. They knew. Or they feared he might find out Aiden stood in the quiet dark watching the skyline pulse with electric light, his jaw set, his mind clear. He was no longer just a father by court decree. He was their shield, their sword, and by the time this was over, the world that had failed so many children would never be the same again. He turned out. The light stepped into the girl's room and whispered, Sleep well. I've got you. Always. Then he closed the door and began making calls. The war had begun. The sun had barely risen when Aiden walked into the Attorney General's office, a leather folder clutched tightly in his hand. He had not slept. Neither had Daniela. She met him in the lobby, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp with the kind of resolve that only came from righteous fury. They had arranged everything. Appointments had been made. Witness statements prepared. The files Ray had given them were now copied, cataloged, and under secure review. But what mattered most, what would shift everything, was how they used it. As they were led through the marble corridors of the building, Aiden thought of Maya and Izzy at home, still sleeping, still unaware that the world that had once failed them was finally being made to answer for it. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. They laid out the evidence, explained the ties between the nonprofit and its shadow donors, pointed directly at the names involved. And when Aiden spoke, he did not do so as a businessman. He spoke as a father, as a man who had witnessed firsthand the quiet resilience of children who had learned to survive without hope. He ended with a simple sentence. We cannot undo what's been done, but we can stop it from ever happening again. The Attorney General listened. Then he leaned back and said, We're opening a full investigation, immediately. Outside, the sky was brightening, but a different light had begun to rise in Aiden's chest. Not just victory, not just relief. Purpose, real and untamed. The next weeks unfolded with the velocity of a tidal wave. News broke. Headlines screamed. Former employees of New Horizons began to speak out. Some came forward willingly. Others were tracked down. Ray Porter was placed in protective custody. Vivian Cross issued a statement of denial. But it was too late. The files were public now, faces and names and numbers laid bare. Aiden's name appeared in the press again, but not as the aloof CEO who had vanished. This time he was the man who exposed a system, who saved a dozen children, who stood with his daughters on the courthouse steps and declared, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning of something better." The board of his former company invited him back, offered him a consulting position, a chance to reclaim his empire. He declined, politely, then permanently. Then, instead, Aiden launched something new, a nonprofit dedicated to restoring and reuniting displaced children, not just placing them in homes, but surrounding them with education, therapy, mentorship. He called it the Sunflower House. Maya cried when she heard the name. "It's because of my dress, isn't it?" she asked. Aiden knelt and said, "It's because of your strength, and because you were the first one who made me believe that something broken could bloom again." Izzy became the unofficial mascot. She handed out crayons at fundraisers. She made everyone wear paper crowns. She insisted that pancakes be served at every board meeting, and no one argued with her. Not once. Maya thrived at school. She joined the chess club, started a garden on the rooftop, wrote essays about how families were built on kindness, not blood. Aiden kept every one of them in a drawer by his bed. But the real shift came slowly, quietly, in moments no headline ever captured. Like the morning Izzy ran to him after scraping her knee and whispered, "I didn't cry because I knew you'd kiss it better." Or the night Maya fell asleep on his lap while reading and drooled on his shoulder and he didn't move for an hour because it felt like a blessing. Or the evening they sat watching the rain and Izzy asked, "Do you think we're your first daughters?" And Aiden said, "You're my forever daughters." And Maya added, "We're your beginning too." Not everything was easy. There were nightmares, court testimonies, therapy sessions filled with hard truths and harder memories. But they faced them together, with honesty, with grace, with pancakes and music and Sunday morning dancing in socks. And as the seasons changed, so did the man who had once measured success in percentages and acquisitions. Aiden now measured it in giggles, in sticky fingers, in storybook endings that began with something as small as two girls staring at chocolate bars. 1 year after that first day in the store, Aiden stood in front of a crowd at the grand opening of the Sunflower House's new headquarters. Maya wore a yellow dress and held his speech in case he forgot his words. Izzy wore a cape and introduced him as the best pancake maker in the world, and also our dad. Aiden smiled and stepped to the microphone. He looked out at the rows of faces. Some strangers, some survivors, all of them stitched together by one thing. The choice to love, he began. "A year ago, I walked into a store and saw 2 little girls standing quietly in front of a shelf. They didn't ask for anything, but they changed everything. I had no idea who they were, and they had no idea that I was about to become the luckiest man alive. Since then, we've built a life together, and through them I've learned the true meaning of family, of showing up, of staying. And today, with this place, we want to give that same hope to other children, because no one should have to earn love, no one should be forgotten, and no one is too small to matter." He ended the speech and looked down to find Maya crying. "Happy tears," she said. Izzy clapped wildly and shouted, "Best dad speech ever." They cut the ribbon together, with gold scissors and sticky hands, and in the distance, sunflowers bloomed. That night back at the penthouse they celebrated. Maya made a toast with sparkling apple cider. "To stories that start with chocolate," she said. Izzy added, "and end with forever." Aiden looked at them, at the life he had built, not by design, but by choice, by love. And he knew this was his greatest legacy, not the empire he once led, but the laughter in this room, the drawings on the fridge, the warmth in a child's hand tucked into his as they walked home. Later, as he tucked them in, Maya asked, "What's the next adventure?" Aiden smiled. "Whatever you want it to be." Izzy yawned. "As long as it has pancakes." He kissed their foreheads and whispered, "Always He stood at the window long after they fell asleep, watching the stars, thinking of all the children still waiting, still hoping. He would find them. He would build more sunflower houses. He would keep showing up, because once upon a time 2 little girls taught a broken man how to be a father, and in doing so they saved him. Forever. And just like that, what began with 2 silent little girls and a chocolate bar became a legacy of love, justice, and healing. Aiden didn't just become a father. He became a protector, a builder of second chances, and a reminder that sometimes family finds you when you least expect it. If this story moved, you take a moment to breathe it in. Let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what part of this journey stayed with you the most? And if you believe in stories that restore your faith in people, make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Click here for another one that will take your breath away. Until next time, remember, sometimes all it takes is showing up.